Welcome back to Quest for Truth. So far, in our series on Leviticus, we've looked at a brief background to the book, the role that Christ played in fulfilling the law, and how the holiness of God is presented in the book. Through this series, we've seen that the book is not an outdated book full of barbaric practices, but gives us an insight into the complete story of the Bible. The Bible tells the story of God and humanity. In Leviticus, we've seen the sacrifices that God required before Jesus' ultimate sacrifice. The shedding of the blood of a perfect and spotless lamb was required due to the holiness and perfection of God. Since Jesus shed his blood one time for all, we no longer need to shed the blood of animals for the forgiveness of sins. These two themes are the big ideas of the book. However, there are other smaller takeaways from the book as well. Let's look at a few of those today. The Levitical priests played a key role in the temporary covering of the sins of the people of Israel. However, there were roles that they carried out that were quite mundane. One of which is found in Leviticus chapter 24, verses 5 through 9. Then you shall take fine flour and bake 12 cakes with it. 2/10 of an ephah shall be in each cake. You shall set them in 2 rows, 6 to a row, on the pure gold table before the Lord. You shall put frankincense on each row, that it may be a memorial portion for the bread, even an offering by fire to the Lord. Every Sabbath day he shall set it before the Lord continually. It is an everlasting covenant for the sons of Israel. It shall be for Aaron and his sons, and they shall eat it in a holy place, for it is most holy to him from the Lord's offerings by fire, his portion forever. When I think of the priests, I don't typically ascribe the job of baker to them, and yet here it is. Every week they are to bake bread, set it before the Lord, and eat it. But this isn't just any bread. It is set apart as holy to God. This may be a mundane task, but it is given by God, and it matters to God just as much as any of the other tasks in the temple. We can often get lost in the day-to-day tasks. We can lose sight of God because we don't see him in the mundane things. And yet, God has laid these mundane things before us to carry out in obedience. In fact, Micah 6:8 says, "And what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God?" God doesn't need us to do big things. He asks us to be obedient with the small things and to seek him in all things. In Luke chapter 16, verses 10 through 11, Jesus says, "He who is faithful in a very little thing is faithful in much, and he who is unrighteous in a very little thing is unrighteous also in much. Therefore, if you have not been faithful in the use of unrighteous wealth, who will entrust the true riches to you?" Jesus goes on to say, "No servant can serve 2 masters, for he will either hate the one and love the other, or else he will be devoted to one and despise the other." The small things in this life are the test of our devotion. If we are truly devoted to Christ, we will carry them out as worship to God. It's not easy, but it begins a constant practice of the presence of God. God is always present in our lives, and he truly cares about us and the small things in our lives. However, some of these things can grow roots and take the place of God in our lives. God scolds the Israelites for their embrace of idol worship. After speaking of the proper means for atonement in Leviticus chapter 17, verse 7, God says, "They shall no longer sacrifice their sacrifices to the goat demons with which they play the harlot." The goat demons most likely refer to the gods of the wilderness, that they were represented by goats. The Israelites began to sacrifice to these false gods in their wanderings in the wilderness. They turned from the one true God and instead served made-up nothings. In general, we don't see sacrificial worship of idols in Western culture, but the premise remains the same. The things that dethrone God in our lives become the things that we focus our time on. We replace God with achievements and medals that mean nothing in the long run. Fame, fortune, advancements in the workplace, trophies. and many other things that you can think of become the end goal, the things that we long for and fight for. We leave God and instead serve earthly nothings. But God is opposed to this, not because he needs our worship, but because when we are without him, our lives are meaningless. He wants us to come to him for our worth because it outlasts all the other things that give you meaning. And when you feel worthless in this world, you run after whatever the fallen world demands. The most common idol today is self. We are naturally selfish, and our fleshly desire is to do what we want. Culture says, let nothing get in the way of your desires. But every now and again, while pursuing earthly pleasures, there arises a small thing called conception. Culture has an answer for that too. Abortion. If your child doesn't fit into your life, kill it. Erase your mistakes by harming others. No problem. Yet God has a much different outlook on the matter. In Leviticus chapter 20, verse 2 says, any man from the sons of Israel or from the aliens sojourning in Israel who give any of this offering to Moloch shall surely be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones. God protects the most vulnerable. Those who cannot speak deserve justice. If someone's abused or killed, we demand justice, yet not with abortion. But God is mean because he pursues justice for the unborn baby. But God has given forgiveness and redemption through his Son. He can redeem even the most broken situation, yet we should not ignore this command of judgment. God is pro-life. We as people should be pro-life as well. Men and women standing against abortion as so-called women's health care, because the opposite is true in reality. Abortion is not only evil, but it's also bad for the women who get an abortion. These women suffer much higher rates of depression and other mental issues, not to mention the physical dangers. They believe a lie that they can control their lives better than God. They play God in their own lives and tragically suffer the consequences. But there is a better way. God prescribed marriage to be the center of a family and blesses them with children. Children are not a burden. Although they have needs and require much attention, they are a blessing from God. Rather than to live a self-fulfilling life full of selfish decisions, we are called by God to be full of humility, self-control, and selflessness. To live as Christ lived, giving all, he humbled himself even to death. Culture says put yourself first and take what you want, but God says put yourself last and he will give you all that you need. God gives the best way for us to live this life. When we follow it, we are drawn into the blessings of Christ. And when we run from it, we wander away from his blessings. Leviticus shows us how we keep God at the forefront of our lives. Even though the law has been fulfilled, there is still much to be heeded in the book of Leviticus.